So, diving straight back in from part 2 for the third and final part of my story so far. This brings us to the beginning of January this year. As I've just mentioned, I've had to take, at this point, 2 weeks off my myofascial release therapy treatments because of the major flare-up that I experienced on Christmas Eve. But at this point, whilst I was still on crutches, I decided to make the drive across and to give the treatment a go. And I'm not sure if this is because I'd almost started to change the narrative in my mind, that I'd sort of take my own healing into my own hands. I give myself permission to heal, to let go, as well as maybe the subconscious message that the therapist had put in my mind that questioned why I hadn't had any emotional response yet. Or perhaps I was just becoming more comfortable with the environment with the more sessions I had. But at the end of this first session back, as I had before, I'd experienced quite significant bodily reactions. But as the sticky area and the tension in my hip was slowly opened up, towards the end of the session I started to feel intense emotion flood up my body, kind of into my head. And before I know it, I started bursting out crying. And I'm talking like violent tears for 2-3 minutes. And I couldn't tell you why I was crying. It was just like there was something deep within me that needed to release and let go, and my body did that by the means of crying. And I just thought, what the fuck is going on? Excuse my French, but I was so sort of overwhelmed, weirded out, but equally fascinated by it, that through such gentle hands-on body work could evoke such extreme emotional reactions. I couldn't believe what was going on, and certainly opened my eyes to the idea that, is there more going on here than just physical pain in my hip? Is there emotional trauma at play that I'm clinging on to, and why I'm not letting go? I don't know, but it really opened my mind to that. And yeah, I was just fascinated. I couldn't quite believe what was happening, and I was just so keen to keep going, really. And I think a bit of theory behind that, I guess, is that I've heard before, and I'm sure many of us have, is that the body can store emotion, or the body keeps a score. I've heard before, but specifically I've come to understand that actually that emotion and trauma can get stuck in or reside within the connective tissue, the fascia, which is primarily the tissue that's being worked on during this treatment method. So as you start to manipulate that tissue and create an environment for those emotions to surface, and perhaps, let's say, they're blocked in the scar tissue that sits in my hip, it's back into your system, and then your body is then able to process that emotion in a way that it perhaps wasn't able to during whatever traumatic event you experienced previously in your life. Now that's just some theory to better contextualize how and why I may have been feeling the emotions that I have, but that certainly makes a bit more sense to me, having gone through it. So yeah, I was just fascinated to just keep going and see where it took me. And what has followed has just been just a crazy few months, and I'm still experiencing these wild sort of emotional and physical reactions now. But for a few examples, I remember in the treatments, after a few more sessions, I would start to shout. Now, not because I consciously was shouting, but it's like my body, whatever was coming to surface, it needed to escape somehow, and it felt the need to shout. I felt a bit uncomfortable doing this initially, because obviously it's a very unfamiliar feeling for me, but to do it in front of the therapist, I was a bit shy. But I started to just gain confidence and, I guess, surrender, really, and just let it happen. I'd start to sometimes sweat quite a lot. I had periods where I had like lots of mucus develop in my mouth, and I had to keep spitting. Again, wasn't very pleasant and kind of embarrassing. During intense periods, I've had to throw up for a few times. And yeah, after these sessions, the next day, I'd feel like sometimes such a intense, deep body fatigue, as if my body was working hard to flush out whatever emotions had been brought to surface by manipulating the stuck tissue, or whatever restrictions are held elsewhere in my body, and just working hard to flush those out. I even, whilst completely resting, would feel my connective tissue, particularly in my hip, but elsewhere in my body, start to, like, at a microscopic level, trying to untangle. And I could even see elsewhere in my body, and I showed my parents this, and like on my arm, for example, there'd be like palpations of the tissue in the fibre, almost like pulsating. What that is, I don't know. Maybe perhaps as I'm starting to open up these restrictions, it's creating new neural pathways that have been awoken for the first time in however long I've been going through this, the last 2 years now. But I'm just having such wild physical and emotional reactions. My bowel movements are impacted. As I mentioned earlier, the connective tissue envelopes everything, including the organs, so it would make sense as you start to free restrictions that are stored and held in the fascia that things like your bowel movement will be impacted. Not particularly present, but equally fascinating. And I just kept having these reactions, and I almost became obsessed about what was next. It was just so overwhelming, intriguing, again fascinating that my body could react in such a way to such gentle hands-on therapy. And then in April I actually had a huge breakthrough moment. Again, I had quite a physical emotional response during the session. It ended in quite a violent shake on the bed, as if my body just needed to shake out whatever was coming to surface. And then as I got up off the bed, people say a weight off your shoulders. I literally felt on my shoulders, my neck, my head, my face. I felt like freer, lighter, as if I'd let something go. I felt almost weirdly primal, like high alert. I'd never felt anything like it. It was so strange. And then the next morning, this is when I started to experience what I've called maybe a spiritual awakening, spiritual experiences. I know that means different things to different people. But yeah, I started to have spiritual experiences, certainly for the first time in my life. And the way that I interpret this is that, I guess when I woke up in the morning, I felt intoxicated. I felt literally high. And it's almost as if I'd normalised this baseline level of mental state and happiness. And I got rid of emotion that was stuck in my body, and all of a sudden I'd elevated that baseline, and consequently it felt like I was high. I remember taking some gentle strides out into the garden, and I don't know how else to say this, but I wasn't consciously saying these words, but I was just spouting out things like, "You're not gonna fucking stop me," and excuse my French, but I don't know who I was talking to. I wasn't consciously saying it, but it was like I was being delivered these messages of positivity, and I was just saying it. And this was also coupled with sort of, over the coming days, sort of deep feelings of, or senses of deep clarity of mind, of who I am, a stronger or closer connection to my authentic self, or my soul, as I'm sure people would interpret, kind of what's important in life to me, but just in general. And actually, all of the distractions and externalities in life, they just don't matter. All these expected societal norms that were imposed on you externally, they don't matter. They're just distraction and noise. And all that does matter is that you're at peace with yourself, you know who you are, you authentically express that person, you do what's right, fair, honest and meaningful, you have purpose, you have a sense of community, and you're close with those that you care for, and that you want to help people. And that was another thing that I started to feel. I started to have this sort of unshakable feeling that I want to help people. I can't have gone through all I've gone through and still going through and do nothing with it. I just have this obligation, this duty to do something about it. And this is why this page is a great start for that. And I don't know what my life's going to look like from here, but I just know it's going to change for the better. And I have this new found purpose and sense of clarity and peace, ultimately. And then this was also coupled at a similar time when I started to have hypnotherapy, which was suggested by the myofascial release therapist, as I started to bring out emotions, and clearly emotions are at play. I will talk about more of this, both the hypnotherapy and the fascial release, in following videos, but effectively the hypnotherapy, briefly, you get put into a hypnotized state and you're encouraged to just talk about whatever comes to mind. And typically for me, this was childhood experiences or in adolescence, and things that you didn't even know you thought, kind of self-consciousness or anxieties or traumatic experiences that you didn't realize that you were sort of clinging on to. And I'd start to speak through them and feel the emotions, and through that process I started to feel like I just lost fear and lost care for what anyone thought, and not in a malicious way, but I just felt free and liberated through the combination of these two treatments and experiences. So I imagine you're wondering, this all sounds good and interesting, but what's the pain like in your hip? And I must be honest, my pain threshold hasn't quite improved yet, and I'm still struggling in everyday life. I can't sit down. I still experience the periodic flare-ups, but I just know deep in my intuition that I'm on the right track, and what I'm doing is what my body needs. I've explored so many treatments for so long, and I've been able to achieve very temporary relief, but there is something going on that is just stopping my body from releasing and contracting back down. And I can't say for sure. It could be that I've got significant scar tissue that's being resilient, it's going to take time to break down. It could be that I've got significant emotion and trauma at play, and why I'm evoking so much emotion in my treatments. It could be a combination of both, but I just know in my gut feeling that this is something I need to go through and what my body needs in order to let go. And I'm just going to keep going, and until I stop having these crazy reactions and I still have pain in my hip, then maybe we can reconsider. But I truly believe, and I know that in my rational mind, the fact that I've still got pain would tell me to stop, and I'm sure that's what some of you are thinking. And I know that comes from a good place, but as I mentioned, I've just stopped caring what other people think. And again, I don't mean that in a malicious way, but I just need to follow what feels right to me. And I encourage that to everyone as well. Just, we have a gut feeling for a reason, and go with that. And it's more often than not, the right decision. So yeah, what am I doing now? I'm still going with my myofascial release treatments. I've started to have something called flotation therapy, which is effectively puts you in a deep meditative state in a tank full of salt water, which keeps you afloat. And I find that really beneficial. It complements the meditation I do at home. Again, things that I'm going to talk about in following videos, the breath work I do at home. And this is all helping me to calm down my nervous system and encourage my body just to release. I've tried doing some stretching, some like yoga, swimming exercises, but unfortunately my body just results in a flare-up after a few days of even trying any of these. So I found a way to intuitively hold stretches. So even just sitting here, I can kind of tune into my body and let my leg move in a certain position in a nuanced angle to specifically hit the sticky spot. And I'll hold that for, as I've mentioned before, 1-2 hours sometimes. And that really slowly starts to release, and then also starts to bring a lot of motions through my body. So even when I'm at home, I have to shake off and let my body go, just to get rid of all the emotions and free out any restrictions that are further created at home. So yeah, I know what I've said there might sound complete, weird and wacky, and believe me, if you told me this 12 months ago, what I was about to go through, I would have told you to piss off. Again, excuse my French, but that's the only words I've got for it. I just can't believe what I'm going through. I deeply believe now in the mind-body connection and just our own innate ability and power to heal if you give the body the right environment and belief to do so. And yeah, that's my kind of story so far. I feel in much more of a stable mental state, and as I mentioned, now feels the right time to start sharing my story, and I hope that maybe this can give some inspiration to people out there for many reasons, but perhaps it's with regards to pain, spirituality, or whatever it may be. Even just 10% of my content touches you in a certain way, then that's amazing. But yeah, I really look forward to continuing to share my journey. As I've mentioned, some of the things I've discussed here, I'm going to discuss individually in following videos and more short form content. And I'm just going to keep going, and I think we should all strive to do that. So thanks for listening. I know it's been quite a long introduction. I think a much needed introduction. And I look forward to sharing my journey, and we'll see where it takes us. Thank you.